How does an immortal being deal with death? Welcome to the Immortal Gifts Podcast, where Dave Robison, Veronica Giguerre, and J Daniel Sawyer read my novel, Immortal Gifts, to you. I'm Catherine Filliard, and I wrote this. This episode of the Immortal Gifts Podcast is sponsored by me. If you like the podcast, tell your friends. If you've run out of friends to tell, buy the book. It's available in ebook, paperback, hardcover, large print, and audio. I also have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, if that's your thing. Impatient? The audiobook is available at my shop and my Patreon and will be headed to all the places audiobooks are sold. And with that, on to the show.
Fallout. Abraham, Red Bank, New Jersey, November 22nd, 2021. The nurse tucked the electric blanket around Solomon. "If you need anything, press the button, and we're watching your vitals." Solomon nodded, and everyone left except me and Destiny. There was a moment of dimly lit quiet, only broken by the beep, beep of the medical equipment. Once everyone was gone, Solomon exploded. "Of all the selfish, inconsiderate—" I hung my head and said nothing. I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I deserved his anger. The enormity of my offense made an apology feel like the wrong thing to say, like I was looking for an unjustified easy out. I didn't deserve forgiveness. I only hoped that, in time, he would come to decide that I'd done the right thing. I hoped I had, at least. He sighed. "I thought you were the sensitive one, and Uncle Ludwig was the one who did things without permission. But apparently—" He made a face and scowled down at his pale hands. "I've taken an oath to do no harm, and you do this to me? It's not like that," I said. "You don't have to bite people without permission." I trailed off as I realized perhaps I wasn't in the best position to discuss consensual biting. From his expression, Solomon caught the gaffe as well. I persisted. "Expired blood bank stock is perfectly drinkable, and I have an in with an employee, and there's animal blood, which isn't kosher, but—" Solomon put both his hands over his face and groaned. "Why would you raise me to be observant and then do this to me?" The tubes and hospital gown sleeves hung over his chest, and the beeping increased in speed. He seemed more dismayed than angry. But I knew Solomon, and he wasn't a man to express anger lightly, and there could very well be an explosion coming. "I never meant to. I wanted to give you a normal Jewish life." The rescue, the masquerade, separating households with Ludwig, the staying away so his wife and/or in-laws wouldn't go into a gay panic, the staying away so he wouldn't notice I hadn't aged. It was all trying to give him a normal life. Destiny's head was moving back and forth between us, a shocked expression on her face. Solomon tried to cross his arms, but all the needles and tubes got in his way. He bared his teeth at them, showing a hint of fang. "I'd made peace with death. Even though it was hard, even though life on earth is a divine gift to be cherished, I told myself I would see Mama and Shayna again. And now, listen," I said, "it will be all right. I'll bring you something to drink, and then I'll show you the ropes. I owed it to him. Solomon cut me off. "No, thank you. This works better with a mentor," I said. "Trust me. Ludwig and I had a falling out, and I tried to go it on my own, and—" "Fine," Solomon said. "Call Uncle Ludwig and ask him to come, and then go home." "Solomon, for the love of Hashem, why would you wait until I was 88 years old to do this?" I covered my face with my hands. "I never meant to. I just couldn't bear it." Solomon sighed again, sounding exasperated. "How old are you?" "I don't know," I said. 200-something, probably. After the first 100 years, who cares? Not me, that's for certain. 200 years, and you haven't come to terms with death? He made a disgusted noise. Then again, why should you? It's not your problem, is it? I looked him in the eye, letting him see that he'd hurt me, and said, It's very much my problem. Solomon sighed again, closing his eyes, and said, Please call Uncle Ludwig. I don't have his number. I pulled out my phone, with Victoria's sweet furry face and bright, clever golden eyes gazing up at me expectantly on the lock screen, and unlocked my phone and made the call.
Destiny, New Jersey, November 22nd, 2021. I drove us home, through the slow sunrise over snow. This was my worst nightmare. Well, no. Trying to get out of a burning house with pets or children was still worse as nightmares went, but this, Solomon hadn't consented. I needed an explanation. I needed to know why. Abraham raised Solomon. Abraham raised Solomon and hadn't respected his wishes in the end. Was it some kind of misguided parental instinct to save his child at all costs? I didn't want Miriam to be a vampire. And did that make him more or less likely to turn me without consent? Oh, gods. I didn't want to leave my husband. Was I really thinking of leaving my husband? It was a pretty serious red flag. We pulled into the driveway, and he ran indoors, which would have been inconsiderate of him if I didn't know that he might literally burst into flame if exposed to the sun. I turned off the car and sat like that for a moment, eyes shut, and took a deep breath. I picked up Miriam to bring her into the house. If the conversation went better than I hoped, I could get the diaper bag later. Oh, gods.
Abraham, Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, November 22nd, 2021. It was sunrise when we arrived home, the snow turning that faint pink color and the air with that crisp snow scent. I rushed to the door, leaving poor Destiny to deal with the baby, but sunlight. I hadn't brought my hat or gloves, so it was dangerous. Once inside, Ivan gazed up at me. He was so sensitive to human emotions now. I picked him up and tried to give him a reassuring hug, and he squirmed out of my arms and stared at me with an alarmed expression, as if he knew I had done something horribly wrong. I tried not to be hurt by this. Destiny came in with Miriam and vanished into the bedroom. I waited in the living room for the inevitable chewing out that I knew was my due. It sounded like she was changing Miriam's clothes, so I waited. Then she came back out. Do you want to tell me what happened? Somehow it would have been easier if she'd yelled at me. He said he wanted for the pain to stop, and the idea of not saving him was unbearable. Destiny closed her eyes and pressed her lips together. I see. I sighed. It was an impulsive mistake. It hurt too much, and I did the wrong thing. Destiny nodded. And he didn't want to be a vampire. I winced. I offered, and he said he didn't want to be in a hospital bed for all eternity, and there wasn't time to explain that he wouldn't be. She lowered her head as if examining the floor. I see. I feel like this is an argument I shouldn't make because I understand he didn't consent, and that makes it academic. But is eternal life really such a terrible thing? Destiny looked me in the eye and said, It's not the eternal life, it's the cost. I became a vegetarian when I was 10 years old. I went to school for 8 years to be a vet. She paced. I wouldn't be able to be a vegetarian. I couldn't have more children. I don't know how I would work at a vet clinic having to run from the car to the door every day. What if it was my turn to open the clinic? She stopped pacing. And rescue adoption day outside the pet food store? I couldn't do that anymore because it's outside in the sun. A single tear rolled down one cheek. I've centered my whole life around loving animals, and then I'd have to choose between drinking their blood and drinking the blood of a human being? I feel like I wouldn't be me anymore if I became a vampire. At least I wouldn't be the sum of my choices anymore. I closed my eyes and bowed my head. That was, as the television show phrased it, her final answer. Which is why I need to know why. Why didn't you respect Solomon's wishes? She didn't sound angry, just earnest. I made a mistake. An impulsive mistake, I said. I can't give you a better answer than that. Destiny nodded and left the room. This seemed to be an insufficient reaction, so after a moment I followed her into the bedroom. Destiny was packing a suitcase. She gazed up at me, her expression guilty. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to sound casual and, I'm certain, failing. Destiny stopped packing and came over to take my hands in hers. "I love you, but I need some time to process what just happened." Process. That was one of those newfangled things people did nowadays. I glanced down at her hands, so warm in mine. "Where are you going?" "My mom's house." I swallowed. "How long?" I glanced up, and Destiny was looking at our hands too. "I don't know," she said. "Not forever, I don't think." Oh, that was comforting. She looked up into my eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "I no longer trust you to let me die if something happens to me, and I don't want to be a vampire. And I need to figure out if I can live with that." I opened my mouth to object, but couldn't think of anything to say. She squeezed my hands. "I understand why you did it. I do. If I don't agree with a pet owner's decisions, it takes a lot of self-control to let them do the wrong thing. Sometimes they want to euthanize a pet that can be easily treated, or refuse to euthanize a hopeless case with a miserable pet, and it's their decision. And pet rescue, you can't save every cat or dog, and it hurts. It hurts to lose them, and it hurts to have to say no to taking another one, and it hurts to adopt them out. Then, Solomon and I aren't your pets." Ouch. She squeezed my hands again as if to take out some of the sting of her words. She smiled a sad smile. "And I love you so much that if I stay now, I'll stay forever, so just give me some time, Abraham." I closed my eyes and nodded, even though I felt like I might literally die of a broken heart if she left. I again hoped that Solomon would come to terms with my terrible mistake. But it wasn't as if he did, I could call up my wife and say, "Solomon forgives me, come home." No, turning Solomon without his consent and leading my wife to think of me as untrustworthy were two separate issues from the same mistake. She picked up the suitcase and left, presumably to put it in the car, and I stood in the bedroom doorway like an idiot. I could hear the car door opening and closing outside. Then she came back in, walked past me, and picked up Miriam. "You're taking Miriam?" I suppose I couldn't process. "You can visit her any time you like," Destiny said. "I want you to be in her life. If this goes on longer than I expect it to, then we'll arrange some kind of shared—" "You're taking my baby!" Destiny cried. "I love you, but I don't trust you not to—" "I can't change a baby. She'd never grow up. Like me, how I'm permanently 19. I can only turn adults." "Good to know," she said, "but she's still breastfeeding, even though she's experimenting with solid food, so it's best if she goes with me." I couldn't argue with the logic, but "You're taking my baby." "I'm sorry," she said. Miriam cried too. I don't think she understood what was happening, but she understood the adults were fighting. I leaned over and kissed Miriam gently on the cheek. "I love you," I whispered. She smelled like milk and baby shampoo, and I missed her already. And then Destiny kissed me on the cheek and left. I could hear her opening and closing the front door, the car door, and finally the car driving away. Abraham, Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, November 23rd, 2021, through December 9th, 2021. The vampire depression cliché has its roots in reality. If you live long enough, you've, as modern Americans say, seen some shit. Sometimes it's too much, and a vampire will go out in the sun intentionally. Too many loved ones outlived, too much human inhumanity witnessed. They call us monsters, but look at the things they do to each other and tell me what's monstrous. Obviously, I couldn't do that, however much I wanted to, however much I knew nothing would ever matter again without Destiny and Miriam. I'd only fooled myself into thinking that things mattered without Flora and Miriam Sr., after all. But there was still the chance that Destiny would come back. Not that a measly couple of decades would matter beyond torturing myself with the inevitable pain to come. And I had pets. That might sound trite, but I held on to the fact that Freddy and Ivan and Inanna, yes, Destiny left Inanna with me, needed me. And Miriam couldn't grow up without a father. That wouldn't be fair to her. In short, I had responsibilities, and had guaranteed that I would have responsibilities forever. Duty, tra-la-la. Not that I dealt with the situation cheerfully or rationally. I drank. Yes, vampires can get drunk. It just takes considerable effort. We're all heavyweights. Our metabolism fights off intoxication almost as quickly as we can consume more alcohol, especially with my preferred drink being beer or wine. I drank, and I Googled for pictures of Flora and the children, because I was finished with hiding from that particular pain. That's why. It's a good thing that vampire pets don't need a litter box or to go out. I fed them, and I fed myself, and I Googled. Everything is online. Everything. Even photos of 19th century actresses who specialized in vampire roles. I took a big swig of beer, a Doppelbock if you care, and reached out to touch the screen. Flora. I had almost 50 years with Flora. I ordered photo prints of some of what I found online. Then I hired an artist to paint a portrait. Why? The noble reason was that I'd made my mistake because I wasn't coping with death and loss, and it was time to actively engage with my grief. The less noble reasons were that I wouldn't have had this issue with Flora because she was already a vampire, and because in an odd way Flora reminded me of Destiny, in a painful dead wife way rather than a painful separated daddy wondering if his wife and daughter would ever come home way. I didn't have either Flora or Destiny, but it had been Destiny's choice to leave. Flora had wanted to stay with me. Or maybe I was simply torturing myself. That felt valid too. The photo prints arrived first, of course. I hung them up near the mantel and put the horrid little tin of Victoria's ashes on the mantel next to a photo of her. My sweet, furry angel in a floral print tin. I would get her something better. As expected, my throwaway emails asking rabbis questions about vampires had been ignored, but Rabbi Kaplan, my own rabbi, wrote back to tell me that it's permitted in some halachim, traditions, to say Kaddish for a pet. I cried for an hour after reading that. Dave, my accountant, came by at one point. He paced around my living room, wringing his hands. "Will you sit down?" I said. Dave sat. "Do we really have to give her money? Does Lewis know if ketubas are legally binding in the U.S.? The correct plural for ketubah is ketubot, but that's not why I groaned and buried my face in my hands. Don't even ask that. Kin aina hara, no evil eye. Dave watched me for a moment, then said, I know, by the way. I regarded him sidelong from under my hair and wondered where this was going. If it was extortion, it was unnecessary because he could simply embezzle instead. And Dave, I liked Dave, but he was no Blade. He was slightly taller than me, but he was basically a short, skinny human guy, and I was a creature of preternatural strength and speed. Any accountant worth his salt would know. You're at least 80, and I think you're older. Numbers tell stories. I snorted. Ludwig said I was insane to let someone else manage my money. Dave reacted with a flicker of recognition of a different name for Lewis, but didn't address it. I won't tell anyone. I like my job. Just... He bit his lip, and his shoulders tensed. I glanced up. If my tests come back saying pancreatic cancer, can we talk? Fuck. He hadn't been pacing for me. Or if he had, he shouldn't have been. Poor Dave. I patted him on the shoulder. Yes, I have a cure for cancer. The cost of the cure might be more than you want to pay, however. And I did. I had a cure for consumption, saddle thrombus, heart failure, and cancer. He nodded and bit his lip again. Thank you. His shoulders relaxed a little. I looked more closely. He'd lost weight, and his color was bad, almost ashy. You'll be all right, I assured him. If he would rather be a vampire than die of cancer, I was more than willing to make that happen for him. Dave gave me an awkward side hug, then pulled away, appearing embarrassed. Time to change the subject. Also, I said, I'm reasonably certain that ketubot are not legally binding in the U.S., though I'd pay her anyway, but don't count us out yet. Dave nodded. Okay, and then he left. I thought about the kitchen, about mornings talking about the meaning of life, about Destiny in her cute blue bathrobe and bunny slippers with her hair tumbling around her, begging to be mussed. I drank some more. Inanna came over and regarded me with cool bronze eyes, tilted her head, and climbed into my lap and licked my face, which made me cry. I hadn't thought she liked me. She washed my tears away, and I kissed her on her furry head and told her she was an angel. I was lying around on the stupid red sectional sofa, thinking I should really get rid of the ridiculous thing, when Ludwig came by to see me. He kneeled by the sofa and brushed my hair out of my eyes. Bist du betrunken? Are you drunk? I laughed. Natürlich. Of course. Ludwig frowned at me. Well, you've put your foot in it this time, haven't you? When is she coming back? I groaned, miserable. I don't know. Ludwig made a face. Sit up, man. In fact, take a shower. I rolled my eyes at him. He stood and walked over to where I had the pictures of Flora and the children. He said nothing, but he looked at them. Then he looked at me. I said nothing back. What was there to say? Take a shower, he said. You stink. My kind doesn't really produce much in the way of oozy stuff. We only really produce things like sweat and fingerprints after we feed. Maybe you shouldn't ask how I know that. I try to lead an ethical vampire life, but I'm not perfect. It's all right, none of the people in the Bible are perfect either, and some of them are quite terrible. We're not the chosen people because we're better than anyone else. The story goes, God went from nation to nation asking if they wanted the Torah, and the other nations said, no, thank you. We were the ones who said yes, and that's why we are chosen, because we chose. But I digress. My point is that I didn't stink. Okay, maybe I smelled a little like alcohol to another vampire. That was fair. And Ludwig was more of a wine man than a beer man. "Up you go," Ludwig said, tugging at my arm and pulling me upright. "Up you go," he repeated, pulling me to my feet. "Take a shower." He dragged me into the bathroom. I shooed him out and showered. When I finished, I realized I hadn't brought a change of clothes, so I wrapped myself in a towel before going into the bedroom. I picked out any old thing, pajama bottoms and a Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt, and came out barefooted and wet-haired to sit on the stupid sectional again. If she didn't come back, I was getting rid of it. I thought longingly of my Victorian horsehair sofa, exiled to the so-called mother-in-law suite. Ludwig sat next to me. "If she divorces you, I want to represent you." That was the single most horrible idea I'd ever entertained in my life, and I laughed the most inappropriate laugh in response. "That's not the response I expected," Ludwig said, "but I'll take it." He quirked up a lip into a lopsided grin. "I don't want a divorce," I said. "If she asks for one, I think I should move to, I don't know, Sacramento or something, and not give her one, which really I shouldn't do. It's considered cruel in Judaism for a man divorcing a woman to deny her a get, a halakhically valid Jewish divorce, and not let her marry again. But I didn't want a divorce. I wanted my romance novel Happily Ever After, and if I couldn't have it, I wanted to sulk in solitude somewhere far away. On second thought, no. I wouldn't sink that far. The ghost of my mother might come haunt me. In some neighborhoods there would be scathing letters to the editor. Scathing social media posts? "Not Sacramento," Ludwig said. "Maybe San Francisco. Why do you get a say?" My voice sounded whiny to my own ears. Ludwig shook his head at me. "And you call me insensitive?" He made a face at me. "By the way, Solomon is fine. He's adjusting better than you did. No troll impersonations under any bridges, at least." Well, at least there was that. Good. I envied Ludwig the chance to mentor Solomon, however. Solomon wasn't taking my calls, but it pleased me that Solomon was doing well. Of course he was. He was a bright boy who succeeded at everything he attempted. Ludwig gave my shoulders a little shake. "Buck up, man. Stiff upper lip and all that. Pull yourself together." "I'm not going sunbathing," I said. "I have pets." Ludwig appeared alarmed at this response, but didn't offer an opinion.
Ludwig, Manhattan, New York, December 9th, 2021. Sacramento? Good Lord! I paced my living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows, red antique sofas, wine storage. The last the most important, of course. Solomon, seated on one of the red sofas, glanced up from what he was reading. Not a treatise on how to be a vampire, alas, there was still no such thing. It was most likely a medical journal, and said, "That's not very nice, Uncle. But I know nothing of their classical music scene, and then I'd have to pass the California bar, and where's your sense of adventure?" "Adventure? Bah. I think I left it at the Opera House with my gloves," I said. Solomon laughed. I intentionally changed the subject. "What are you reading?" "Medical journal. I would love it if there was some kind of kosher vampire dietary supplement, and I'm reading articles on synthetic blood." I sat next to him, intrigued. "Is there such a thing?" "It would make my life easier, assuming it tasted better than animal blood." "Experimentally," he said. "Many of them are hemoglobin-based and derived from bovine blood, so they would also not be kosher. There are also products based on stem cells and others on perfluorocarbons, which are not water-soluble and require emulsion. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like they aren't purchasable options on the market. Also, we could just drink the cow's blood as it is." "True," Solomon grimaced. "There have been human trials, and one of the perfluorocarbon-based products was approved and subsequently withdrawn. They have approved one synthetic blood for veterinary use. Too bad we can't ask Destiny for a sample to see if it's drinkable. Solomon raised his eyebrow at me. It's one of the hemoglobin-based ones. Ah, I said. Solomon tilted his head and regarded me for a moment. I waited for him to ask the obvious question. Why can't we ask Destiny? She took your side, I said. Moved out. Temporarily, he hopes. He's taking it badly. Hence, Sacramento. He raised his eyebrows again and put down the medical journal. What do you think? About what? He rolled his eyes at me. You know what? Yes, I did. I stood up, crossed my arms, and gave him my most disapproving look. It's not nice to play your parents against each other. Solomon rolled his eyes at me like he was a teenager again. Were you two an item? Good Lord! Had he really had the indecency to ask me such a thing? You moderns make everything so vulgar. You didn't answer my question, Solomon said, sounding smug. No, we were not. I walked over to the other sofa, but I didn't sit. I glared at it for a moment, then gazed back at Solomon. Oh. Solomon bit his lip and glanced at the floor, then looked back up at me. So, if you're not an item, why is it he can still do no wrong? You always take his side. It's less that he can do no wrong, I said, and more that I cannot condemn him for doing to you the exact same thing I did to him. Solomon blinked. Perhaps that thought had never occurred to him. I walked over and sat next to him. Besides, I adjusted better than he did. It's a religious thing, I think. I was raised with drinking the literal blood of my Lord Jesus, and you two were raised that blood is the single most taboo thing anyone can drink. Solomon put his face in his hands between his knees and groaned. I patted him on the back. You'll be all right, I promise. I was distraught at first, but now that I've accepted it, I can see the advantages. I consider it a blessing now. You'll never get sick, you'll never die, you'll have all the time in the world to pursue your interests. He should have raised me to be an atheist if he planned on doing this. He didn't plan this, he said, trying to sound reassuring. He's a sensitive boy and can be impulsive occasionally. All that passion that he channels into his music, sometimes it overflows. I patted Solomon's hand. Remember, he's still 19 in a way. Solomon gazed up at me, radiating skepticism. Are you sure you two were never? I'm certain. It came out sounding far more sad than I intended, which surprised me. Solomon considered me for a moment. Do you want her to divorce him? No. After a moment, I added, even if I were inclined that way, he prefers the company of women. I was proud that I expressed myself so delicately. Solomon patted my shoulder. There was a long, awkward pause, and it was Solomon's turn to change the subject. 19? Do our brains develop after the change? I don't see why they would. No other part of our body does. Arrested development. Literally. I could feel my face creasing into a frown. That's not very... The human brain isn't finished developing until the age of 25 or so. Specifically the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for making good decisions, planning, and prioritizing. He considered this for a moment. How old were you when you turned? 21, I admitted. Why did this feel like confessing a terrible character flaw? Solomon regarded me for a moment. His gaze was so searching that I looked away. He blessedly changed the subject again. I wish I understood precisely the scientific nature of our, as you put it, dietary needs. Is it the hemoglobin? The oxygenation? Both? Neither? I don't know the answer to that, he said. All I know is that we're neither demons nor unholy. I can take communion. So it's a blood-borne medical condition. He picked up a pencil and a notebook and chewed on the pencil. That might narrow things down. I'm sure you'll figure it out, given time, I smiled at him. All vampires have gifts based on their passions, and I suspect this is yours.
Destiny. Eatontown, New Jersey, December 9th, 2021. I'd left my sweet baby Inanna at Abraham's, and I felt incredibly guilty about it. I didn't want to explain her diet to my mother's until I was good and ready, and I wasn't ready. Lucy and I had gone out to the movies the previous night. She'd offered to take me to a bar and let me vent, but I wasn't ready to explain to her either. As I came into the kitchen, Bridget was asking Morgan, "How was your taekwondo last night?" I poured myself a cup of coffee and started adding cream and sugar. Morgan snickered. "We had a new guy who saw me, and he was like, 'A girl? I bet you're gay too.' I answered, 'Yup, you caught on to that one quick.' Then Marty had us spar, and I kicked his ass and offered him a moist towelette after." Bridget and I giggled, and Morgan grinned at us. The three of us sat at the kitchen table, drinking our hot beverages of choice. The silence grew awkward. "When you're ready to talk," Bridget said, "we're ready to listen." Today she wore her hair in a dark cloud of curls, held back by a beaded headband. "And slap a bitch if need be," Morgan offered. She was wearing one of her Taekwondo dojo shirts, boxers and a bathrobe. I laughed. I didn't know what Abraham would do if Morgan slapped him. Probably catch her hand on the way to his face like a ninja or some other such non-violent vampire shit. "Don't slap him." Bridget sat at the table next to me and poured me a cup of green tea. Morgan poured herself a cup of coffee that smelled so strong I was surprised that the spoon didn't stand up. "Spill," Morgan said. I looked at the two of them. If anyone would understand what I was about to say, it was them. "Abraham is a vampire." They didn't react, which felt like an odd response, so I elaborated. "I don't mean that he's a goth, or that he's a psychic vampire that saps the life out of discussions. I mean, he keeps expired blood bank stock in our fridge because he prefers his food to be ethically sourced." Bridget raised an eyebrow, but her eyes appeared concerned. Morgan sat back and crossed her arms. Well, Morgan was the more sciencey of my two mothers, so maybe she didn't believe in vampires. "That's why I left Inanna there. She was injured and he cured her by making her a vampire too." Bridget raised her other eyebrow, and Morgan opened her mouth to object, so I rolled up my sleeve to show the faint bruise on my wrist from a bite. Abraham's bite marks healed fast, but I let him drink from me. Morgan examined my wrist with an expression of growing outrage. "It was consensual," I said. "So, what's the problem?" Bridget asked. I sighed. "He turned someone without permission, and I don't want to be a vampire, so—" Morgan released my arm to scowl into her cup of coffee. "It's traditional to say that I never liked him, but that's not true. 'Men all suck' feels wrong coming from us, and is also not true," Bridget added, her voice sympathetic. "Well," I said, "the person in question was terminally ill, but also didn't want to be a vampire." "What did they have?" Morgan asked. "He was in his 80s and had heart failure." "Yeah," Morgan said. "He would have died." Her voice was clipped, matter of fact. I didn't know if that helped or not. I bit my lip, took a sip of green tea, and continued. "I thought I would live a normal mortal life with an eternally young and gorgeous husband, but now I'm afraid he'll make me a vampire too, and I need to decide if I can live with that." "I don't go that way," Bridget said, "but he is beautiful." Morgan examined at my wrist again. "I assume he bit you more than once." I nodded. "Can he market his saliva as a treatment for wounds?" I laughed. "You two are taking this well." "Well," Morgan said, "he wronged someone else, not our baby." "I'm a polytheist," Bridget said. "If I can believe in the fair folk, ley lines, and magic, why not vampires?" She laughed, but it was a gentle laugh. "I always knew he was an old soul. I just assumed his body was younger than that." "That's why I left Inanna at Abraham's," I said. "I didn't want to deal with feeding her blood." "Not very vegetarian-friendly," Bridget agreed. "And also hard to explain to my moms," I added. Morgan made a sound of disgust. "We both had to come out to our parents. We know firsthand how hard it is when your parents show their ass and make your situation about them. I took Morgan's hand and squeezed it. I knew Morgan still considered coming out to her parents the worst experience of her life. So, this is temporary? Bridget asked. Or permanent? I'm not sure, I admitted, but I'm hoping it's temporary. Well, Bridget said, we love you and are here for you, no matter what you decide.
Abraham, Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, December 10th, 2021. The key turning in the lock was probably Ludwig, I thought. He'd been coming by to check up on me often enough that I'd given him a key. I didn't bother to get up. Ivan had curled up next to me, back pressed into my chest, and was purring softly. I didn't want to disturb him, so I stayed where I was and kissed his furry little head. But it wasn't Ludwig. It was Destiny. Destiny and Miriam. I sat up and stared at them. Was she coming back? She didn't have a suitcase. Ivan tilted his head at them. She was so hot, as the modern Americans say. Even in jeans and sneakers and a t-shirt, her hair tumbled down loose exactly the way I like it. She wasn't wearing makeup, but that simply made her Cupid's bow lips look more kissable. Her soft, pale skin with the faintest, cutest hint of freckles cried out to be touched. "You haven't been by to visit Miriam," Destiny said. I snuffled and rubbed my face. I didn't have a good answer. Inanna walked into the room, stared at Destiny, then pointedly turned right around and left the room. Destiny winced. Freddie trotted into the room and wagged his tail at her as if to apologize for his housemate's snub. Destiny walked over to the mantel where there was a brand-new portrait of Flora and the children. The artist had worked overtime. High pay will do that. Despite her initial estimate of a month, she had completed the painting in 2 weeks. I'd replaced our ketubah, the decorative Jewish prenuptial agreement, with the painting of Flora and the children. I'd moved the ketubah to the hallway, next to our wedding portrait. I hadn't included a Lieberman clause promising a get in our ketubah on the grounds that Destiny wasn't Jewish and wouldn't care. The ketubah was for me. I don't know what it says about me that I wanted a document promising my wife food, sex, and a share of my money should we divorce. Our wedding had been at the Justice of the Peace. Our vow renewal had been small and interfaith and presided over by a woman who got her credentials out of an ad in the back of Rolling Stone magazine. But I'd wanted some part of it to be Jewish. Destiny said nothing about the missing ketubah. All she said was, "She's pretty." "Is that—" "Flora," I said, "and the children, John and Eliza. Did they—" She stopped and paused before continuing. "Did they all die in the fire?" "Yes." "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I." There was an awkward pause. She gazed at the photo prints next to it. "The artist did a good job." "I agree." We stared at each other, silent. I stood up and took Miriam away from her and kissed her on her little forehead. Miriam gurgled at me and reached up to grab my hair. "Da da 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 da." "Yes," I said, smiling my first smile since Destiny left. "I'm your dada." "Da da da da." "That's right." I kissed her on the forehead again. "She missed you," Destiny said. "I missed her too." "I missed you too," Destiny said, her voice soft. I poked Miriam lightly on the nose, making her giggle, and observed, "You didn't bring the suitcase." "No," she said, and glanced away. She looked like she was going to say something, but changed her mind. Then she said, "How long were you and Flora married?" 50 years, I said. "Not long enough." "I was going to say that was a long time," she said. "How old were you when you got married?" I didn't know why she wanted to talk about Flora. Perhaps she wanted to talk about anything that wasn't us. Not very old. I don't know, 30? I laughed. She was over 300. Destiny blinked. I looked her in the eye and said, "The heart wants what it wants." She swallowed. 50 years is the blink of an eye, but you've probably got 50 years. And if you're willing to give it to me, I'll take it, under any restrictions you want to place. And I meant it. I'd rather have Destiny for 50 years and watch her grow old and die if the alternative was not having her at all. "Good to know," she whispered. "I'll take it under advisement." "Do," I said. "Please." She took Miriam back and said, "I should go. Visit us. Leaving so soon?" She smiled at me, a sad smile. "Before I do something I'll regret. I think I need a chaperone." I gave her a long glance. She looked amazing, even more beautiful than I remembered. Her gorgeous hair tumbled down loose to her waist, and I had a vivid flash of memory of her pulling me onto the bed and her hair falling all around me like a silk curtain. She smelled incredible, like lavender shampoo and a hint of jasmine. I wanted to wrap up every one of my senses in her, to touch and to taste, and things that were a terrible idea if she was going to go back to her mother's house. "I'll visit you." "Please," she said. She walked back to the door and gave me one last look. Was that longing, or was that my wishful thinking? Before she left, I picked up my violin and practiced. The pets gathered around to listen.
Destiny. Eatontown, New Jersey, December 13th, 2021. We sat on the lavender sofa together. Miriam was asleep on my lap, and Morgan and Bridget were streaming the L Word on low volume. There was a bang, and the front door popped open. 4 men came in, dressed in black, wearing black ski caps and a black stripe across their eyes. Miriam woke up and wailed a distressed baby cry. "What the fuck?" Morgan stood and raised her fists. Bridget squeaked. I handed her Miriam and stood next to Morgan and raised my fists as well, glancing around the room for something heavy. They said nothing, just moved forward, kicking over our coffee table as they came. There was a tinkling sound as Bridget's glass tea set shattered, and her crystal ball rolled behind the sofa. I grabbed Morgan's softball bat and swung, striking one of them in the arm that he raised to protect his head. "Fuck!" He grabbed at the bat, and I kicked him in the stomach until he let go of it. Note to self, don't let the thug grab the bat. Morgan did one of her taekwondo roundhouse kicks, hitting an approaching thug in the head. She didn't turn her head, but she said, "The strategic thing to do would be to get in the car and drive away." Behind me, I heard Bridget scrambling towards the back door. Good. I eyed the man in front of me and swung the softball bat meaningfully. He eyed me back, then ran after Bridget and my baby. I chased him. There was a tall, balding man with a scraggly fringe of hair standing in front of the back door, blocking the path. "Morgan!" I raised the bat and ran at him. He caught it faster than my eye could track. He was strong, so strong, and I realized he was a vampire. It must have shown on my face because he smirked at me and tugged at the bat. I let go of it and backed away. He pulled a circular amulet out from under his shirt with one hand and pointed at me with index and middle finger with the other. "You witches have no power over me. I think the bitch broke my arm," the thug I'd hit with the bat said. The vampire rolled his eyes at him. Then he grabbed Bridget and started prying Miriam out of her arms. No. "Stop," I said. "You'll hurt her." "Then I'm sure you'll want to cooperate to prevent that," he said, his voice serene. One man put his hands on Miriam and said, "You pull the bitch's arms and I'll catch the baby." The vampire let go of Miriam and started pulling on Bridget's wrists. She whimpered, and I had a sudden panic that he still might hurt Miriam or hurt Bridget in a way that would prevent her from playing the cello. Something in the vampire's attitude told me not to point that out. I was certain that if I verbalized my fears, he would do it. He would hurt my baby. My vision darkened at the edges, and I concentrated on breathing. I would not pass out. Morgan stormed into the kitchen, fists raised. "You hurt either of them and you'll answer to me." "What she said," I said, and opened the silverware drawer and grabbed their sharpest knife. They pulled Miriam out of Bridget's arms together. Bridget whimpered, but her eyes were defiant. The vampire let go of her and took the baby from his thug. Bridget rubbed her forearms and wrists, glaring. Morgan's thug stumbled into the kitchen, clutching his side, but didn't complain.
"Put down the knife,"
the vampire said.
"I'd rather have both you and the baby, but I really only need one of you."
I considered my options, mostly whether I believed he'd hurt my precious angel Miriam. The answer, horrifyingly, was yes. My heart pounding, I put the knife back in the kitchen drawer and then crossed my arms and glared at him, trying to look calm and not scream. The thug I'd hit with a baseball bat punched me in the face. I was more aware of slamming backwards into the kitchen counter than the blow, but I could tell it would sting later. I heard Morgan swear, Bridget sob.
"Did I tell you to hit her?"
the vampire asked. The thug flinched.
"No, Master Thomas."
So his name was Thomas. Something nudged at the back of my mind before. "Are you the guy who led the march?" He smiled at me and did a sarcastic half-bow.
"I'm pleased you've heard of me, although you obviously haven't taken my teachings to heart."
I didn't know what this meant because I'm not up on my bigoted psychos, but I suspected he meant Abraham. The vampire, Thomas, glanced around.
"Clean up this mess. We want him inside where he won't attract attention."
He indicated Morgan and Bridget with a tilt of his head.
"Tie their hands, gag them, and take them upstairs."
He stared at the least injured thug.
"You wait for him."
I had to watch them bind and gag my mothers. Bridget was clearly frightened but defiant. Morgan was simmering with rage. They led them upstairs and made them lie down on the floor and tied their legs. Then they led me downstairs to a dirty white van parked out front in the snow. There were men inside with brown button-down shirts. One of them had some kind of shotgun.
"Let me off at the warehouse,"
Thomas said,
"and take them to the hotel."
A hotel? Without the vampire? Hopefully Miriam and I could escape without the vampire.
Abraham, Eatontown, New Jersey, December 13th, 2021. My car pulled into Destiny's mother's snowy driveway around 7 p.m., which meant it was already dark. Because it was time to stop wallowing and start acting like someone Destiny might want to come back to, that's why. I let the pets out of the car and they followed me up to the house, bounding through the crunchy bluish snow. It came up to Ivan's and Inanna's shoulders, and halfway to the door, Ivan hopped gently onto Freddy's back. The door was ajar, and the doorknob was lying broken on the ground in front of it. That was ominous. I knocked anyway and called, "Hello?" There was a muffled sound from inside, and next to me, Inanna growled. Her hackles were up. Freddy forced the door open with a leap and charged in. Ivan tumbled gracelessly off Freddy's back, landed on his feet, and tilted his head. Freddy barked, and Ivan charged in, so I followed. Ivan led me upstairs, where Bridget and Morgan were lying on the floor next to their bed, tied up and gagged. Bridget was crying. My heart skipped a beat in sympathy, and Morgan looked like raw fury would break her bonds. I ran in to untie them, and a dark shape lunged from behind the door. I dodged the flash of knife, and the three pets slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. He rolled, scrambled back to his feet. There was an arc of shiny metal followed by a splash of blood and a yap of pain. "Freddy!" Inanna leaped onto the man's hand in a flash of tortoiseshell fur and sharp claws. The man screamed and dropped the knife. She'd covered his hand in deep, bloody gashes, as if a tiger had mauled him instead of a house cat. Freddy's wound closed up as we watched. The man's eyes grew wide. Then he stared at Inanna, who growled at him, and Ivan, who hissed. "What the fuck?" He looked like he might run for a moment, but Inanna growled at him, deep and menacing, and Freddy bared his teeth and tensed to jump, snarling, and the man put his hands up, his back to a mirrored closet door. He wore all black, with a black stripe painted across his face, like a cheap ninja costume without the hood and mask, and a swastika armband. His unkempt hair fell over his pasty face. I picked up the knife. "Where is my wife?" My accent was distinctly German, I noted. "Fuck you, and fuck George Soros, and fuck the Jewish space lasers." George Soros? The Jewish philanthropist that Fox News was obsessed with? And Jewish space lasers? Maybe it was better not to ask. "Oh, come on," I said. "They obviously left you here to give me a message." They clearly hadn't left him for his wit. "They left me here to kill you." I rolled my eyes and used the knife to cut Bridget's and Morgan's hands free. Bridget ungagged herself first. "They took them. They took Destiny and the baby." She untied her own feet while she spoke, then sat unsteadily on her bed. They had a silk bedspread painted with astrological symbols. It was almost certainly handmade. Morgan untied her feet first and stood up before removing her gag. She assumed a martial arts stance next to the dresser, upon which was a small statue of Aphrodite releasing doves, fresh roses, pink candles, and small pink rocks. Blood dripped onto the floor from the man's hand. It smelled delicious. I tried not to salivate, but I let a hint of fang show when I asked, "Where is my wife?" I didn't really want to frighten Bridget and Morgan and didn't know how much they knew, but "It's a trap," Morgan said. "A trap for you specifically." I turned my head to stare at Morgan. "Apparently the white supremacist doesn't think Jewish vampires should exist," she said. The idiot thug stared at me. Then he shakily made the sign of the cross. Maybe he'd realized that he was disposable. I rolled my eyes at him, which was apparently not the reaction he'd expected. I hadn't interacted with Thomas directly since, when, 180 years ago? 170? My kind have long memories, but perhaps it was a cultural bias with the Talmud forbidding revenge, but it felt unhinged. Also, Destiny's parents knew. I'd expected them to take it well, but "It's okay, honey," Bridget said. "Our daughter told us everything. You're still the same person you always were, just older and with pointier teeth." "The threefold law is a bitch," Morgan said, but her tone was sympathetic. She turned her attention back to the intruder. "How about you? Are you ready for a little instant karma?" She made a fist. "I'm only an orange belt, but I can still hit pretty hard for an old lady." I leaned in closer to the thug, letting him get a good look at my fangs. "Where is my wife?" "I don't know," he said. "Some abandoned building in Brooklyn is all I know." The whites showed around his eyes now, and his hands shook. I was going to need help. I pulled out my phone to call Ludwig. As I did, I could hear Bridget next to me calling the police, much to my alarm. The police were fine for a bunch of thugs, but Thomas would go through them like a knife through warm brie. I hoped the police would be all right and stay out of his way. I had another memory of Miriam, Shayna, and the single bullet to kill them both. I imagined the sound of the gun and the splatter of blood, but this time it was Destiny and my Miriam. I thought I might vomit at the mental image, but instead I called Ludwig and asked him to come and help.
You've been listening to the Immortal Gifts Podcast, and I'm your host and author, Catherine Villiard. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happened next, and please rate the podcast to help other people find it. See you next time, and remember, becoming a vampire is a thing that can just happen to you, but being a monster is a choice.